Welcome to the Founders Corner, brought to you by OneBridge Accounting. Here's your host, Eli Clark.
Hey everyone, Eli Clark here, co-founder and CEO of OneBridge Accounting and host of the Founders Corner podcast. Today's guest is Krisa De La Cruz, the CEO and founder of Chaparral Creative. Krisa, very excited to have you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, Eli.
Awesome. Krisa, to kick us off, would you mind just giving us a quick introduction into who you are and what you're doing at Chaparral Creative and kind of what makes you guys unique?
Absolutely. I am Krisa De La Cruz, founder of Chaparral Creative. We are a full-service marketing agency, relatively new but growing rapidly agency, based here in Texas, but serving clients nationwide. We provide services from website development, maintenance, hosting, edits, etc., to social media marketing, SEO, content writing, video development, like graphic design, so on and so forth. So it's kind of all over the place, but we love what we do. So it's been a fun ride so far.
Awesome. What were some of the experiences that led you to starting Chaparral Creative? Like, did you work in industry before, or did you just jump in headfirst into Chaparral?
It's really a little bit of both, to be honest, because I was never I wouldn't have ever called myself in the marketing industry specifically before, but I always had a lot of involvement with marketing. So I was the CEO of my hometown Chamber of Commerce in CBB for a while, which I absolutely loved doing, and it was a really fun experience, and I learned a lot. And of course, marketing is a huge part of being successful in that role. And then I went back to a previous employer, SGR, Strategic Government Resources, a local government consulting firm, and really got more familiar with some of the more modern marketing approaches, specifically SEO. And the more I learned about it, the more I kind of just fell in love with it. Honestly, I'd always associated marketing with like design, and I'm not a designer. In fact, if you had some kind of polarity scale, I'd be at the bottom of the design capability list, or scale. So when I got more familiar with how content plays a role and how that's how you build reputation online and how Google rankings work and so on and so forth, that part I was really drawn to. I usually prefer looking at analytics dashboards versus, font choices, but I realized that's a huge part of being successful in marketing is being able to look at the analytics and look at what you could do differently and better based on those results. And so my best friend is a designer, and she had an SEO company for a long time. She did a lot of websites, and she did content too, of course, but her love is really more on the design side. And so we started talking, and really through a series of amazingly timed events, including a local business owner here who really encouraged me to go out on my own, we formed Chaparral Creative. So here we are, and we've been able to scale really well and build an awesome, solid team as well.
Awesome. It sounds like an amazing partnership. You've got kind of the analytical side and maybe more the creative side. You've got both of best worlds in the same house, right? That's really cool.
Well, it really has. Yeah.
Awesome. You mentioned the creative side was a little bit of a struggle, I imagine, probably early on in the agency. Were there any other struggles that surprised you as you kind of took the leap and started Chaparral?
I think probably most small business owners or most entrepreneurs can relate to this feeling, but it's like you pull that trigger to go out and do something, to start a business. And I mean, I don't even think I slept for like 3 days. I was so nervous. Like, what if we don't get clients? What if this doesn't work? All of those self-doubt talks and everything. But it did work, and we started getting, calls and emails and people sending referral business. And it was, amazing. But I think what we did well, I think it was a challenge, and I think we handled it really well, was that we built up our team really quickly. And that was a huge blessing because I think what happens a lot of times, and this is speculation, of course, but I've seen it play out, is that you have a solo entrepreneur who starts a company
Hmm.
and they don't backfill their team fast enough to keep up with demand, which then just hurts reputation. And so I think where we really excelled was kind of maintaining that balance between staffing and cash flow, which is sometimes a really tight balance, and making sure that we had the right people on our team to be able to accommodate the amount of business that we were generating. So it's been pretty smooth. I mean, obviously some lessons learned along the way too. But overall, it's been really smooth.
Yeah, that's a huge balance, especially if you're growing super fast. That balance between staffing, personnel, and then cash flow, and you got to pay yourself, and you've got everything that's moving around. Um,
Mhm.
what does Chaparral look like as far as headcount today?
We have really four like core team members, and then we have a slew of contract personnel that we reach out to regularly or work with regularly. We started with the first person that we were able to bring on was Taylor, who actually worked for me back when I was at the Chamber of Commerce, and then worked for SGR when I went to SGR, and now works for me here. And so we've worked together for quite a while, and she is incredible. She's got like this amazing balance all in one human, where she's creative and she can do design work so well. But then she's also very analytical and detailed. And so she's absolutely amazing, and I have depended on her. She came on board when I was all ready. I mean, it was at that moment where as a business owner, if I don't bring somebody else on, I'm gonna drown. I can't take on any. And so when she started, I would just say, "Can you handle this? Can you handle this? Can just throw and
Right.
step at her." And she just did. She just ran with it and did it. So she's been great. And then we have, Kristen, who I also worked with at the chamber and at SGR and now here. And so, she's handling operations. I realized, after we kind of leveled out a little bit on handling client demand and all of that, I realized we really, really needed somebody helping to implement our systems and processes, because I wanted to make sure that we were operating efficiently, and that we were automating the things that should be automated so that we could focus on the relationships and not spend all of our time doing back and forth tasks that we could automate. And so we brought Kristen on, and she's been such a blessing as well. She's got this like just awesome, analytical brain where she pays attention to every detail and every process and thinks through how could we do this better, smarter, etc. And so she's been awesome, and she's actually going through the HubSpot certification right now. So she's helping clients also with their internal setup, of their automations through their HubSpot accounts or their CRM, respective CRM. So she's able to offer a service to our clients, but
Cool.
also hugely beneficial to our team. And then Nija joined us recently as our social media expert, and she's added so much value to our social media content for our customers. So she really brings a level of strategy, but I don't think that we had previously.
I love that. I mean, marketing firms and marketing agencies in general and we forget this sometimes, is they're in the service industry, right? And the service industry is all about service, right? And service is partly technology, but it's very much a core aspect of that is the people that you hire and you bring on, right? And that is often the bottleneck of growth, is whether you have people or if it's so focused on the founder, or there's so many bottlenecks that can occur if you don't have the right people in the right seats. So it sounds like you're on the right track for that, which is awesome to hear.
Very thankful. I mean, it has been, I won't say that I haven't had some anxiety or stress around that, but gosh, I'm so thankful for the team that I have, because we're able to accomplish so much together and we work well together. Everybody's dependable. So, not trying to rub it in to anyone out there who's like in that area, but I've just been really, really in a lot of ways, very lucky, very fortunate.
I love that. Love to hear that. Well, Krista, it's great to get some background to your experience and what you guys are doing at the agency. I think that helps set a good foundation for the rest of our discussion today to talk about content and SEO and kind of some of those exciting things. And I'd like to start us off just by getting your thoughts on how you think AI is kind of changing the type of content that marketers make, and kind of what direction you see the space going in as far as the content that's created by the marketing industry or marketing firms in general.
Yeah, gosh, that's such a good and relevant question right now. And I think anybody in this industry is learning as rapidly as we possibly can, because it's changing constantly too. Of course, there's I never wanted to sound like I'm downplaying the significance, impact, or importance when it comes to AI and marketing, because there's a huge benefit to what AI can do for marketers and for companies and exposure and awareness and all of that. I think one of the things that we're seeing is that there's obviously one of the core ingredients for good, solid SEO is maintaining that reputation, managing your reputation online. And of course, that can be done a few different ways. One of those is content, and keyword utilization, backlinks, but also reviews. And now more than ever, Google reviews are becoming more and more important. And ironically, right, like Google reviews are pretty low cost as far as building your reputation. You have to ask people to do it and make it easy for them to fill that out. But when they do, let's assume they're positive, right? When they do, and you get these positive reviews, that really helps your reputation online. So I think that's a huge part of it. And then, of course, the huge disruption there is the AI overview and generative AI as well. But really, the AI overviews came in. I don't want to say like a wrecking ball because that's so negative. But what we saw was that, especially when it comes to ads, we saw a huge decrease in clicks on ads once AI overviews were implemented by Google. And so, which makes sense because obviously, if you're getting the AI overview and you have these links over here, they're more likely to get clicked. But there's no way to really measure that right now, anyway. So you can't really tell. It will include those clicks in your reports, but it's lumped in, so you really can't tell what those were AI overview. What we do know is that the AI overview is looking for snippets of information that they can pull that have really good data. And it's less about the how-tos, which was, anybody who's been blogging for a while, like that was a very popular way to blog for a long time. And it was really popular for SEO. And so AI overviews are not prioritizing those how-tos. So it's more about, how you're putting your content out there. And I don't know enough about this to speak with any expertise. This is one of those, like, just make sure you're paying attention to this, people, is the schema that you're using. And I think what we're going to see is specific schema related to AI content so that it does get pulled in for those overviews and for generative AI, for, in ChatGPT and Claude, all those things as well. So I think that probably in the very near future, and I'm not saying nobody out there is already doing this, but I'll catch up as soon as possible if they are, that I think we'll start seeing some specific schemas made for AI content specifically.
Yeah, love that. Very interesting. There's a lot to unpack there from what you were talking about as far as like AI. We've talked about this before. It's the Wild West. There's so many things that are going on, and the environment is just changing so quickly, right? But let's try and unpack a little bit about what you're saying. I love what you're talking about AI overview. It's kind of throwing out, or not throwing out, but kind of pushing down some of the paid results, right? Which is really interesting to see that happening. And I've seen Google test with a lot of different responses to a query, to a search, and they respond in different ways. So that's really interesting. But how do you think, as looking into the future just a little bit, how can marketers design content for AI so that it either shows up in the overview or it shows up in a way that is still driving results for clients?
Yeah, I think some of that is going to be that schema, long term. I think that's going to have a huge impact on the AI overviews picking up content. And I think the other is it's modular. Did I say that right? Modular content. Why is that word hard? So basically really organizing it well on the page so that it's broken up into snippets, because it's important to have your key information written well in snippets or modular components so that the AI overview can pick it up. I think that's going to be really big.
So for those who are listening who maybe aren't as familiar with the way web pages are structured, and maybe your tags and your headlines and stuff like that, walk us through what you mean by the schema, and then walk us through what you mean by modular text. Like, what would that look like for somebody who's not as familiar with it?
No, great question. And actually, if it's possible, maybe to put a link in here. I have a link on the outside.
We can.
Job explaining that. Well, I'm biased, but I think it does a great job explaining that. But the example that I usually give when somebody asks me about schema is, so if you are promoting a job, like say you have a job board, right? And so you're putting jobs on a web page to promote these jobs. Well, if you use a schema specifically, which is kind of like a blueprint, if you use a schema specific to jobs, then Google knows this is for job. Like they're able to recognize that and index that as a job board page. And so if somebody's searching for jobs, they're more likely to rank that page higher. So making sure your schema matches what you're trying to accomplish is pretty important. And then as far as modular content, like having sections is huge. A lot of people are doing that really well. I don't think that's any kind of like news flash information there, but with good titles, like you said, that's huge. So that people, we know people scan, right? Like we know that anybody in the blogging industry for the last however long, like people are going to scan when they read. So having really good sections that are titled well and broken up well, very important.
This segues into a question I was wondering is how does this change the way that you plan content? Has it changed at all, or is it still the same as far as like, you come up with a headline and then you write in that content later, or has it changed as you're trying to optimize for AI overview and AI snippets?
Yeah, I think it will change. I don't know that it has yet, or at least not for my clients. Like we have not made massive strategy changes yet. But I think that it will change. I will say this though, maybe this is like a shameless plug, but what I see a lot are really great businesses that do great work, that have a good reputation, and they write good content with no strategy behind that content. And that's one of the areas where it's painful sometimes to see happening, because even though you may have great content, you might be doing a great job at whatever you do, it will be so much more effective if you can align that in an overall strategy, whether that's, your keywords, using your search console effectively. If you're running ads, making sure your ads align with what you're promoting with content, making sure you're sharing that on your social media channels, and just doing that to where it's seamless, so to speak, but you're really serving your business the best you possibly can when it comes to your marketing.
Love that. There's a lot of, I think, businesses that will show up and they're just like, show up online, which is still great advice, right? Show up online. But to put out content without a strategy is not optimizing to the fullest capability, right? Do you think
Yeah,
that?
something, but no, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. I just said something's better than nothing, but that doesn't mean it's the best. So
Yeah, 100%. Do you think that strategy or the overarching strategy for content will change as AI overview changes, or the way search, maybe as people search more on ChatGPT or they search on other tools like that? Do you think that the strategies will need to change, or are the strategies still strong and just the implementation will be different? What are your thoughts on that?
oh, I do. I think they will change. I had a conversation recently with one of my friends who's a lot more technically advanced than I am, and that's not saying much, but he's super impressive. And I asked this very similar question. I was asking more about like the value of content. We're putting
Yes.
so much content out on the web that like eventually are we just decreasing the value of every bit of content anyway? And he said this, and I've been thinking about it ever since this conversation. He said, "What do you consider the internet?" And I said,
Hmm.
"What do you mean?" And he said, "Like, when you think of the internet, what do you think of?" And I was like, "Well, I think of Google. I'm in Google so much all day, every day." And I said, "Well, I guess I think of connectivity. I think of being able to access this information. And he said, "Right, but you think of a browser." I was like, "Yeah, I
Hmm.
think so." Oh, that is the image anyway that pops into my head. And he said, "Okay, but that's not the internet. The internet is not a browser. That's not the same thing." And I was like, "Okay." I know that knowledge-wise. And he said, "People talk about getting onto the internet or getting into the internet, but the internet is all around us. Like we live in the internet. We're not accessing it. We live in it." And it really changed the way I think about strategy. And I think ongoing that's going to be so relevant for anybody in the marketing industry, because I think that we're going to see things like making sure that our content is optimized for voice, for Alexa to pick up or whatever device. I think we're going to start seeing so much more content accessible other places other than a browser, if that makes sense. And so I think that's going to change everything.
Yeah, that's super interesting to think about, like, what might that look like, right? Like, because currently, at least for me, I do most of my search on Google. I'm kind of the same way. Like that's where I go. I type it in on my phone or on the computer. That's where I'm doing searching. I'll use Chat GPT maybe for like a specific function related to work or whatever. But like if I'm looking for a restaurant, I'm not typing that into Chat GPT, right? I'm searching that on Google. Um, we don't have an Alexa, so I don't use an Alexa, but there is, those types of things where you think about like how is search going to evolve over time as technology evolves, not just AI, but like the way that we look for things. That's an interesting thought, right?
It is.
It's going to
Yeah.
change.
Right now it's very much driven on somebody seeks something, right? Somebody is
Right.
taking knowledge about something or content about something, and then they get that delivered through XYZ mechanism or method. But what about when content becomes preemptive? When AI is
Mm.
able to deliver content before someone even asks for it? So there are going to be so many changes.
That's gonna be interesting. I think we've seen some forms of that in marketing before, as far as like, you see that. I think of retailers as a good example of this, like Walmart or Target, or I've heard of case studies where it's like they know your purchase history, they know what you've bought, or Amazon. Amazon, that's a way better example. Let's use Amazon as an example here, right? Where they know what you've purchased in the past. And I get emails all the time that's like, hey, you bought these things, you might like these things. And that's kind of like maybe a rudimentary or kind of the beginning version of that. But I don't know. It's a little bit scary to me to think about the idea that it's like it knows what I'm going to need ahead of time. Beyond just like, hey, here's your toilet paper. Now that you're expired, it's up. But it's like, hey, here's something that we know is going on in your life that you might want to purchase this for. That's very interesting to think about.
Yeah, we've seen it with retargeting, right? Like, you're walking
Yeah.
by Old Navy and you get a text notification or pop up or
Right.
whatever notification, like, oh, we have a sale today or whatever. We've seen it like
Yeah.
that. We've seen it retarget on social media from your search history. And I think one of the best examples is like, do you remember, gosh, I don't know how many years ago it was, but when your phone, you'd get in the car or go to work or whatever, and your phone would be like, your drive time is expected to be blah, 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 or whatever. And you're
Right. Yes. Yeah.
like, where it was going? How do you know? But it recognized that pattern. So it preempted you even asking it how long it was going to take that day due to traffic. It told you before you ever asked. And I think we're going to see so much more of that. And we've had the technology, like the retargeting but those are still based on human action and then
Mm.
prediction. Whereas with AI, you're getting something that's using a trained logic to predict your patterns and to predict what you would want or what you would need. And so I think that that's so much. I mean, it's mind blowing to me.
It
It's
is. Yeah.
so much more advanced than what we've experienced in the past.
It is. It takes it to another level, right? And what's funny is, or interesting from the user experience perspective, is we've been trained almost to expect that level of information. Uh, like you mentioned, like the commute. How long is the commute going to be? There's sometimes I'll type in an address into Google Maps and it won't. And I've been there before, and it won't pop it up immediately. I'm like, come on, Google, don't you know where I'm supposed to be going? Like, you should understand my intent here, right? But like you're saying, it's that human interaction that is the input. But eventually, you'll get to the point where, based on all the information and based on the algorithms and things, it knows more, right? Which is just a fascinating thought.
Yeah. And there's going to be a huge, I think there's a comfort level shift that's taking place.
Oh, totally. Yeah.
Right. And we've seen that I mean, I remember when Facebook came out, and sorry, mom, but my own mother is like, people are putting pictures of themselves and their families on this,
Right.
And I'm like, yeah, mom, like people are doing that, it's not that big of a deal. But that was a huge deal, to a lot of people in that generation. I'm not trying to stereotype, but I mean, it was unnatural. It felt uncomfortable, it felt like a security risk of some sort. And in my during my MBA class on marketing, I said that weird, but during my marketing class as part of my MBA, we were talking about retargeting, and she said, "Raise your hand if you're uncomfortable with this." And a few people in the class raised their hand, and she said, "Why?" They were because that's weird. I don't want somebody knowing my actions or know it. I don't like it. I don't want to be followed. I don't want to be tracked. I don't like that. She said, "Okay." And it was, I mean, again, I'm not trying to stereotype. I'm just giving you my own observation, okay? It was all the people in the class that were the older students. I'll say.
Hmm.
I'm not going to try to guess an age range because I'm not trying to label anyone in this. But she asked, okay, so what about who in here is really comfortable with that? And you saw the younger students raise their hand, truly. And she said, why? Why are you comfortable with that? And they're like, because it's a convenience. That's so
Right.
convenient. Like if I'm getting a retargeted ad, that's something they know I'm interested in. I'm not getting spammed with an ad I don't want. I don't want anything from that company or whatever. And so there's this huge difference of comfort level with that type of advertising. And I think that's going to be a huge part of the shift too, is we're going to have people who do not want that and do not like that. We're going to have a big group of people that do want that and see it as a convenience.
Yeah, and I think you'll see brands putting money where obviously where the ROI is. But if you see this shift where more data is accessible about what a consumer wants, I think you're going to see more people spending money on more brands spending money on that type of technology than they would on just a spray and pray or just awareness type campaigns, right? Just because you're going to get a higher ROI from that and maximizing your budget as much as you can, right?
Absolutely. And we're seeing, I mean, Google is all over that already, and it's only going to
Oh yeah,
improve.
yeah.
So which is best from a consumer standpoint as well.
Yeah. I want to shift gears just for a little bit and kind of talk about generating content. I think there's a lot of marketers out there who use ChatGPT or they use other types of language models or other types of software to generate content. What are some mistakes that you often see marketers make when it comes to actually creating content with AI?
So yeah, it is really common. And listen, I'm going to tell you up front, I use ChatGPT, I use Claude,
Hmm.
some other ones as well. I don't use them to generate content from start to scratch. I usually use it for brainstorming content. Like, I want to write a blog post about this, but help me think through the key points or the section breaks, things like
Totally.
that. I certainly use it for editing because even though I was raised by a school teacher, I still make mistakes, even just basic grammar mistakes. So I use it for that also. But what I've seen, and I think anybody in the marketing industry, for the most part, would absolutely agree with this. People don't always trust the AI generated content. And so
Right.
they want to see something that's written by a human. Now, the number one predictor of being able to tell if it's written by a human versus AI is typos. So
Oh yeah.
I'm not intentionally put back in typos into your work so that it looks human generated. But that is the number one predictor on whether or not it was generated by a human. And you can tell, like
Yeah.
you can. I mean, people who are familiar with using Chat GPT, like you can tell when it doesn't sound like a human, when it sounds more polished, like too polished almost. And so
Right.
I think incorporating that human element, whether that's relating with a story or making it somewhat personal, I think that you're just going to have such a better receptivity from your target audience because you want it to build a relationship. You don't want it just to spam people. And so if you want people to, if you're after the relationship building, and I would hope that most people are when they write content, you want people to relate to it, and you want them to say, "Oh, this was valuable to me, and I relate to this or relate to this author," so that they do find value in it. And I think if you're putting content out that sounds like a robot, it's going to be a lot harder for people to find value in it, and could actually hurt your reputation, honestly.
I love that. I've had a lot of conversations recently about like as things become more automated with AI, it becomes so much more important for us to stand out as individuals authentically and tell our individual story, tell that story how it relates to a brand, how it relates to values that that brand upholds, and to connect in that way. And it's less about transactional information. It's less like how to do this or how to do that, but more about, oh, I have a relationship with this brand or I have a relationship with this founder or this company or whatever. And that's the direction I think content seems to be going in based on the conversations I've had.
Yeah, yeah. I think it'll be a struggle because there's such a, there's the convenience to using AI,
Really.
generative AI to write content. And it's the same thing. Actually, I'll say this too. It's the same thing with graphic design. There's a lot of people using ChatGPT to create their logo or create a design. What happens is, you can't. so ChatGPT can be great for brainstorming and does some really cool graphics. Like I am not saying don't use it. I am 100% on the embrace AI bandwagon. Okay. But what happens with a logo, especially, is that when you try to have that printed on something, or when you need to make a bigger, blow it up to be on whatever XYZ graphic or collateral or website, it gets pixelated or it distorts. And so really that's not ideal, obviously. And it's a lot better to just pay the graphic designer or the marketing company to go ahead and get, design those logo files.
You're going to get a better product in the end. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And a product that you use long lasting instead of something that's not really usable in other situations.
Yeah. Well, Krisa, this has been a really interesting discussion for us to talk about what search is going to look like with AI overview, is to talk about strategy and, content and how that relates to that, and maybe some tips for those who are listening, who are using AI to create content. So I think this has been a fantastic discussion. If people want to get a hold of you, if they want to talk with you some more, where can they find you?
Absolutely. And my website is chaparralcreative.com. I'm going to spell it because chaparral is not an easy word to spell, but it's CHAPARRAL creative.com. And I'm on, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. But yeah, there's contact information on the website. So I'd encourage people to go to that first, and they can check out more about what we do and then get in touch with us. We'd love to work with you.
Awesome. Well, Krisa, it's been great having you on the show. Thanks for coming on and sharing your story with us. It's been great.
Yeah, I really appreciate you. Thanks so much.
Thank you for joining us in this episode of The Founders Corner, the podcast series for marketing firms and agencies looking to learn and level up their business. You can check out more podcasts and other content from OneBridge Accounting by following the links in the show notes. At OneBridge Accounting, we're all about helping marketing and creative firms organize their finances, maximize their profits, save cash, and automate their accounting and finance functions. Check out our other resources and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts.